We deal in paint, pigment, light and shadow, realism, surrealism, impressionism, and ghost stories.
An interest in the oddball, a predilection toward the bizarre. And this place is nothing if it isn't bizarre.
There's no admission, no requirement of membership, only a strong and abiding belief in the dark at the top of the stairs, or things that go bump in the night. The name of this place, should you have come in here accidentally out of the rain, is the Night Gallery.
Welcome back, art lovers, to Midnight Viewing, the Night Gallery podcast. I'm Father Malone, and with me here in the gallery are the projection booths, Mike White.
I hate spiders.
And as always, the Culture Cast's Chris Dashew.
I like marmalade wine, though.
Who doesn't? And on this episode, we're going to be discussing Night Gallery Season 2, Episode 4, which aired on October 6th, 1971, and was broken into 4 segments. Those are A Fear of Spiders, Junior, Marmalade Wine, and The Academy.
I have to say, this episode brings together so many of our other podcasts, Chris.
Yes.
This is amazing. This is like the Rosetta Stone of Chris and Mike podcasts.
It's true. From Theodore Flicker to Patrick O'Neill to Jeff Corey, and Robert Morris even. They're all there,
and
It's
Wally Cox.
And
baby.
Wally Cox, yeah.
Hey, I'm involved in this, gentlemen, because many of these people were also involved with Banachek.
It's a Rosetta Stone for all of us, really.
It's a weirding way thing, folks.
Ooh. Which might make all 4 of these segments a little bit more palatable.
Yes, actually. I had a good time with this one. Anyway, here we go.
The story behind this offering, a word which we've coined just for the occasion, arachnophobia. It means for our purposes a special distaste for those crawly little beasties with the multi-legged hairy bodies. In other words, a fear of spiders. The title of our first painting in this, The Night Gallery.
Fear of Spiders. Now, this was written by Rod Serling, based on a short story by Elizabeth M. Walter, and was directed by John Aston, who took over directing duties 3 days before filming was to commence because Sammy Fableman was overworked and didn't want to shoot this episode. Yet Steven Spielberg was initially the director of this particular episode and bowed out, leading Jack Laird to say, "That kid will never work at Universal again."
And he didn't. He faded into anonymity, and there you go.
This one stars Patrick O'Neill, Kim Stanley, and Tom Petty. I'm going to mention Tom Petty right out the gate here. He's one of my favorite character actors of all time, most specifically from the Taking Pelham 1, 2, 3, Kaz Dolowitz, that voice. Anyway, this story concerns an arachnophobe or arachnidphobe. Good work coining the phrase, Rod, who has little use for humanity until he runs afoul of a particularly inhuman foe. Chris, what'd you think?
I liked it better when Creepshow did it, like a decade later.
They're creeping up on you, the superior version?
Yeah, because what a weird and ultimately forgettable way to open this episode. Because not only is Patrick O'Neill effectively wasted, but the climax of this story is... it's behind a closed door and has zero emotional impact on the story. It's not a good segment, and it's the longest segment in this episode, too, which is great in and of itself.
What about you, Mike?
Enjoyed it. I like the big fake spider behind the door that we see at one point, and just how those spiders keep increasing in size in his sink. And I'm like, are you noticing this? That they're getting bigger and bigger here? The whole relationship between him and the Elizabeth Croft character, I'm just like not really picking up everything that they're laying down here. So I was like, they describe him as a misanthrope, and I'm just like, okay, he seems like an okay guy to me. Very well spoken, very erudite, but just doesn't like spiders. Okay. And then Tom Petty, I appreciate especially his music work, Running Down a Dream notwithstanding. I loved when he showed up and just how he's just, what do you want from me? So good. I really liked him, and just, why didn't you go to a hotel or something rather than being tortured by spiders? And then also, sorry, who is he yelling at the beginning of this episode? Is this his house cleaner or housekeeper that he's yelling at? Because he keeps yelling to somebody that we never see.
That's the upstairs neighbor. That's
really,
that's the lovelorn woman. Yes, she lives directly above him. So at first he's yelling at her from above to leave him alone, and then when she comes to the door,
Wow. Okay, was not picking up on that.
It really is a Rod Serling episode segment, isn't it? That's all you can say. When I was watching it yesterday, I saw that his name was on it, and I just went, oh, good, it's going to be terrible. And you know what? It's not great.
I think I liked it more than you did, but I can't say that I loved this one.
What the story that they're telling, appreciate what they're getting at of what I mentioned, like a guy who has no use for people and he's so absorbed with his work and he wants to just work and he can't be bothered by a lovelorn woman or his asshole landlord, and he can't be bothered by anything. Fine. But
I completely sympathize with that.
Yeah, but at the same time, to what end are you telling a story about his rejection of humanity? Because it doesn't go anywhere. And by the end of the story, I guess one could say that he makes the right choice in rejecting humanity because the woman who he confides in throws him into the room with the spider and it kills him.
Turns out he was right all along.
Right.
Now, I liked it much more than you, Chris, and probably on par with you, Mike. Like, it's an okay episode. I like the actors in it a great deal. Patrick O'Neill manages to pull off this thing where they've stacked the deck against his character. They make him, he's a food critic and an interior designer. That apartment they've appointed, it's like an apothecary jar mania in there. Did you see the size of the giant salt shaker beside his door? It's insanity, right? So even under all of that, he manages to bring a bunch of steel behind all of his performance. Like, they go so far as, and this was, I thought, weird, where they made Tom Petty effectively call him a queer.
I was like, Patrick O'Neill's a coded gay character, is he not?
Yes,
yeah.
Definitely.
You don't like women because you're too busy or because you're gay. Which one is it? Make a choice, Rod, because I get what you're laying down here, but why? What's the meaning of that subtext in the story then?
Yeah, it's completely out of nowhere, and that's what I'm saying. Patrick O'Neill sort of like resists it and gives it like a grounding that they weren't allowing, because he doesn't play into the stereotype that they were just constructing all around him, which I liked. And then on top of that, Kim Stanley. I love Kim Stanley. If you've never seen a movie called Seance on a Wet Afternoon, go watch that movie.
Funny.
Oh God, she's great. She's always struck me as like a much more reasonable Shelley Winters.
Yeah, plays it a little closer to the vest.
Like she wants to go to the moon, but knows that gravity is a thing like that. And I think she's really great here. And evidently, John Astin got in trouble with the brass because he was allowing her to improv a lot, and he defended her like all down the line. It's weird that even for John Astin, like the writing was on the wall for Rod Serling here, where it's just sorry, we're not paying attention to your thing. We're making it better if we can. So I liked like their performances in it on a fundamental level. You mentioned it, Mike. This guy who is he's petrified of spiders, looks into his room and there's a Great Dane-sized spider in there. He closes the door and locks it. And then the only thing he can think to do at that moment is go talk to the super, blows him up. And now his only option is the lovelorn spinster upstairs who he spurned and has a grudge against him. That's it. He's a successful writer. Like you said, go to a hotel and return with a pistol or a pickaxe or something.
How dare you inject logic into an otherwise illogical story? It seems like it was completely set-bound, and that even extended to the logic of the episode.
Yeah, it's a stage play, but a stage play would have had a better-looking spider. Look, the spider I actually really, but I think maybe had the original director of the episode directed this one, it would have been genuinely scary. Like, even as bad as it was, he would have figured out a way to make it, to shoot it to creep us out, because I don't know why they kept cutting to that same horrible shot of the spider either. Like,
they showed it a lot.
A lot.
Yeah.
Could they have just zoomed the shot in or something and replay? Anyway,
the best part of this would have been after she closes the door. You hear Patrick O'Neill get again. We're assuming he gets killed by the spider. It would have been better if the door then opened and it was just Patrick O'Neill in a spider costume. And just a giant Spider-Man, not Spider-Man, but a man dressed up like a spider. And that's it.
Along those lines, Chris, I thought the episode should have ended with him going up and she was the spider. She like slowly transforms into a spider and then gets her revenge. Like, that would have been horrifying. Did either of you bother to read the short story by Elizabeth Walter?
I did not know.
Okay, very similar. The plot is the same. Obviously, it's fleshed out more because it's prose. In this, he sees the spider briefly and freaks out and doesn't know if he had actually seen it or not. And that's why he goes up to her. And she isn't as persistent. Like, she's just the girl upstairs that he's avoiding because they had a relationship and now he doesn't want to deal with her anymore. So he goes up there, could you come down and check? And they end up just having a night together where she lays out all the horrible ways he treated her. And then he sleeps there, and in the morning wakes up and he's, oh, let's go see if that spider was real or not, and goes into the room. She sees the spider, pushes him in, closes the door and locks it. They had slept together the night before, so now she's going to have his child. He jumps out a window and kills himself rather than be attacked by the spider. So it's much more, was it even there to begin with, kind of a thing, as opposed to he was eaten by a spider at the end of the episode. Way more effective. I don't know why they changed it. Actually, I do know why they changed it, because this is actually a remake of a Twilight Zone episode written by Rod Serling called The Thing About Machines, which is basically the same story, except the Thing About Machines has a scene in the middle where they're trying to, a little bit of conflict, where he injected a repairman. And so the character that doesn't exist in the short story, the repairman, the dialogue between Tom Petty and Patrick O'Neill is virtually identical to the original Twilight Zone. So why is he complaining that he no longer is in control of the show when he's just plagiarizing himself?
Ladies and gentlemen, if you will, come with me on a journey of my laziness on screen for all to see. It feels so fucking disingenuous at this point with this show. Like, Rod Serling, just leave. Just go. It's okay. Other people can work on your show.
Day, sir.
Good day. You get nothing other than constantly cashing residual checks for the rest of your lifetime for all the shows you created. But you couldn't just leave well enough alone. It's like, at some point, when do you start tarnishing your own legacy?
Right.
That's my, like, it
was here.
Just stop.
It was in the interviews following the show that he tarnished his own legacy, because he could have just shrugged and nobody would have noticed. We would have been like, oh, it was the end of his career, whatever.
Yeah, it could have been like, hey, whatever. The show is what it is now, and I was involved within the first season. There you go. Anything past that, I wasn't involved with. That's what I would say, and just let them hang themselves with however much rope they want. Like, I don't need to do it for them.
Rod wanted to keep working, so he wanted to shift all the blame immediately, so he could get another. Yeah, it's not cool. I do want to point out a couple of things in this episode that I liked. A filigreed typewriter? Yes, please. There's a line of dialogue that I thought was very odd, which was when they're both talking, and he says about the size of the spider, he says, perhaps it's a mutation. There's a lot of that going around. Is that a thalidomide reference, do you think? It's right around the time. Anyway.
It is around the time. Yeah, I picked up on how odd that line was, but I didn't think of the thalidomide thing at all. But
that's why I was like, what could they possibly be talking about in 1970 when there's a lot of mutations going on? Oh, thalidomide.
It's also the era of giant monsters attacking, so this whole thing of like ants and spiders and all, we've already had that in the 50s, but the 70s, the 70s was like a resurgence of the giant monsters are going to get you, because it was radiation in the 50s and now it's environmental revenge in the 70s.
Like that movie Prophecy, that was around this time.
Yes, it was.
Or that Talia Shire thing, yeah.
And the Night of the Lupins.
Which was written by one of the writers on this show. I forget who now, but I know it was written by one of them.
Good, it shows. I thought they were referencing Spider-Man. Yes. That's what I thought they were referencing, because that's where I come at this show from. Again, Spider-Man would have existed at this time. It's not like it wouldn't have.
He absolutely did exist. I don't know that these elder statesmen of the old
Rod Serling could give zero shits about anything like that. That's lowbrow entertainment. That's like interviewing Martin Scorsese about Marvel movies today. Pish posh.
Not a fake. Stop it.
Marty, we got questions for you. Primarily, how do you feel about Marvel films? Not any of the movies you worked on, but how do you feel about movies you will never make?
Which people just keep insisting on doing. I don't understand why.
Ask him what his thoughts are on Tiff.
Yeah, you've been in this business for over 50 years, have made all of these, but yeah, we want to ask your opinions about these stupid trends.
And that our next segment, which doesn't get you didn't hear an introduction by Rod Serling because he's petty. This is called Junior, written by Gene R. Kearney and directed by Theodore J. Flicker. Gentlemen, who's Theodore J. Flicker?
He's the credited co-creator of Barney Miller, though apparently he wasn't welcome on set.
Danny Arnold knew what he wanted and he knew how to get it. And he didn't need no Theodore Flicker's input at all, apparently.
But he's got one hell of a career, or had one hell of a career. Theater, sculpture, TV, film as well. So yeah, he had his hands in a lot of stuff. But yeah, we mostly know him, Chris and I, from watching him every single week. We see his name up on the screen for Barney Miller.
The three of us share a Theodore Flicker moment. He directed a segment from Twilight Zone 85. That was Act Break with James Coco when he ended up writing all of Shakespeare's plays.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
That's not a Playboy gag.
Speaking of, this one stars Wally Cox. This is just a blackout sketch. Look, I'm just going to lay it out. A guy and his wife are sleeping. They hear their kid calling for water. He goes in. The wife says, "It's your baby." And then he has to go bring the kid water. He goes into the crib. It's Frankenstein. It's Frankenstein sprawled on the thing. And then he pours water on his face.
You have left out the best part. Daddy, the fucking voice that they give the baby is that is the moment something is wrong in a big way, as they would say. It's very weird. And again, I knew that when you watch a segment like this, that it's going to be, they show you something funny and that's it. And that's exactly what it is. But I wasn't expecting Frankenstein in the crib. I just wasn't. So
was it effective for you?
It was funny, and it was about it was about a minute and a half long. So it's automatically better than Fear of Spiders because it doesn't overstay its welcome.
Here's the question that in my mind that I want to pass on to you from watching this episode. Do you guys wear socks to bed?
No.
Nor I, but Wally Cox does, and I thought that was weird.
Fair.
I think I might have when I was a kid, but I haven't for decades.
At a certain point, you got to let your feet free. Come on now. The only other thought I had was now the Frankenstein was played by a guy named Bill Svano, who's a folk singer, the Rooftop Singers. He created the story for Fatal Beauty, that Whoopi Goldberg movie.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
And this is my prayer that if anything came of this particular segment, I hope he spent the rest of the day terrorizing Burbank. The makeup is great for this 30
and they give him that same gag from Airplane. He has a drinking problem. That's what I thought of when he's like, I was like, oh, okay, Airplane.
He's just a baby. He doesn't know how to. He could have given him a sippy cup. That would have been a better joke.
I guess.
Item number 3 in the night gallery. We call it Marmalade wine. Look at it, if you will, with gentle and restrained eyes. The way you'd look at a maniac in the woods. Because that's the story it tells. Hold out your glasses and get ready for a very special nightcap.
This segment is called Marmalade Wine, written by Gerald Friedman, based on a short story by Joan Aiken, and was also directed by Gerald Friedman, and stars Robert Morse and Rudy Valley. It's an abstract, impressionist, appointed tale of a man lost in the woods and the man who takes him in. What'd you think, Mike?
I love the way that this was shot. That opening with Robert Morse going through that very, let's say, expressionistic setting, and the fake trees and him slipping and sliding and everything. I really like the way that this was shot. The story itself, maybe not so much. It was nice having this little, what was it, Sweet Smell of Success? Or is that the movie that Morrison...
How to Succeed in Business.
Thank you. How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. So having both Morse and Rudy Valley in here. And man, I mostly know Rudy Valley through his singing, not his acting. What a strange guy. Even stranger than Robert Morse, who was always just amazing. And I know that we saw him in some Twilight Zone 85 as well.
Played Cupid.
Yeah.
Ye gods.
So, ye gods. I saw the joke coming a mile away as far as the twist of the episode, but I was just, what the hell is going on here? This whole oh, by the way, I happen to be able to predict things. I'm like, where did this come from? This is bizarre. And just the way that their dialogue goes, I think I really liked this, even though I was still pretty perplexed by the end of it.
How about you, Chris?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was watching it yesterday with a friend of mine, and her and I were sitting there watching it, and I didn't know what the twist was. And when there's a scene before the twist, and he's standing there talking to him, he's like, "Oh, you passed out, you were drunk, you're here, give me some more predictions." I was like, they cut his feet off. That's what happened here. And my friend was like, she was like, no, that's not it. And then at the end, he's like, I cut your feet off. I was like, of course that's what it was. There's nothing else it could have been with something like this. The way that they just, in my mind, the reason it was easy to tell what the twist was the way the camera was positioned there in that scene. Just the shot of him standing at the foot of the bed, touching the foot of the bed a lot. Rudy Valley. I don't know. It works almost in spite of itself. They decide to do something very different from what they've done in the show up until this point. Very stylistically different. I think it works. I don't know if it would work again if they do this weird minimalist thing that they're going for, abstract minimalism, but I like this. I think it also really works because it's like obviously clearly a stage play. It's a stage play. Like, and the dialogue is well written. It works rather well, but it doesn't overstay its welcome, which I think is the best thing about any of these kind of, there's like blackout sketches, short sketches, and then everything else. These short sketches tend to work when they don't overstay their welcome and they don't go too high concept.
Yeah, and this isn't full length. This is actually pretty brief as an episode, but I'm going to echo both of you. It is beautifully shot. This sort of monochrome, abstract, like flats they have, which ordinarily you would just see in like a theater. You don't see it that often shot for film, but when it is, it's always striking. And that's, no, I think if that had not been the case, had they shot it like traditionally and it looked set bound in any way, shape, or form, I would not like this episode at all. But I think this actually elevates it all, because I had the same questions you did, Mike, which was, this is what I wrote down as my note. I love the set, love the performers. Why the fuck is he lying about it being a psychic? What is he doing there to begin with? What is happening here?
Yeah.
So then I read the short story.
So please, Phil.
Joe Nakin's short story concerns this guy named Blacker, who she front loads in. It's a big part of the opening of the story that all of his friends know him as the liar. And that's been his thing, and he's trying to work against it, but he always needs to like one up someone in a conversation, or he works for a flea bitten, like bottom of the barrel, like a tabloid, and everyone around him is better. And he's off running down this stupid story and gets lost in the woods and finds this guy and runs into the doctor. And as they're getting drunker, like he starts to feel like smaller and smaller in the face of this guy who's at one point thought to be a genius surgeon. And so he just starts like spilling this thing. Oh yeah, I used to be psychic when I was a kid. I had moments and whatever. And then it leads to this. We don't get any of that here. We just get a guy.
Which is why this wouldn't have worked if it hadn't been shot so well.
Exactly. If this was the script that they were using, then this is the only way to save it, is to do this thing with the way that they had shot it, because none of it makes any sense. Now, having said that, I really liked it. All of those little problems can be papered over if you have absolutely charismatic leads, which we do here, and the filmmaking is confident and has an actual vision. And the other thing I want to say is, as horrific as the situation ends up for Robert Morris, I have no doubt in my mind that he could easily overcome Rudy Vallee. Like, easily.
That's the thing about this versus the short story. In this, he's a successful photographer. So why does he have to lie?
Is he a successful photographer? He doesn't even know how to work camera. I don't know who he is or what he is.
The doctor was familiar with his photography. He says as much. Doesn't he? Or am I literally thinking of something else?
No, he just says, oh, how wonderful for you. That must feel fantastic being able to shoot a picture. He doesn't say, I know who you are. It's all one-sided there. By the way, in prose, you can get away with a character early on going, God, what was the other thing I know about this guy? And then later on going, oh my God, I just remembered. You can't have a character asking himself out loud over and over, where is it I know this guy from? He like laid out the guy's entire biography to him, and he's like, you didn't follow up? You just stopped caring after learning everything else about him?
He doesn't know the one thing he needs to know, okay? Yeah. The one singular piece of information he needs to know. He doesn't remember it until he's halfway to being tusked by the guy.
Yeah. It's still fun. It's still good. Like, but there are problems. The other thing I wanted to point out is the painting at the beginning of this one. Tom Wright, I just want to mention him, he does all the paintings. It's a really simple still life. It's effectively a bottle of wine, the Marmalade wine, and some fruit and such. But apparently his motivation for just making it a still life was because that's how the character ends up, which I think is really cool.
That's fair. I think this is a good short segment. It works in spite of the kinky writing.
Gerald Freeman, I mean, we've seen him do at least 2 things before, if memory serves, because I want to say he did Room with a View, that really odd one, right, where it's the guy looking down, the whole cuckolding thing. He did the Flip Side of Satan one from the last time that we spoke. He's going to do at least 1 or 2 more coming up here. But this was pretty early in his filmography. This was like he had just done a couple episodes of TV before this. But he's going to go on to do A Cold Night's Death, which is a really fascinating TV movie and kind of predates a lot of stuff from The Thing. I remember watching that when I was doing an episode on The Thing just to see what this is. And then Chrissy ends up doing a couple X-Files later, very late in his career.
Again, this episode, it's weird. This episode has a lot of, and we're going to even talk about it with the next segment. It has a lot of ties back to stuff that we have spent lots of time talking about or referencing on things that we've talked about.
A small item for the pedagogues amongst you. A little something to be found in the drawer alongside the old school ties. A picture, if you will, a very special school where the students don't matriculate but rather are marooned. Where the scholars are not enrolled but rather sentenced. The painting is called The Academy.
The final segment of this episode is called The Academy. This one was written by Rod Serling, based on a short story by David Ely, who is the author of Seconds, which was adapted into a film featuring Jeff Corey and directed by Jeff Corey. Now, guys, the second season of Night Gallery, I've been trying to spotlight a few people who were behind the scenes or in front of the scenes. In this case, it's actually Jeff Corey I want to talk about. Jeff Corey, he was a stage actor, television actor, film actor in the 1930s. The war comes. He enlists in the Navy, where he's stationed on the Yorktown, and he's a motion picture combat photographer. He wins a citation from the Navy for, quote, his sequence of a kamikaze attempt on the carrier Yorktown, done in the face of grave danger, is one of the great picture sequences of the war in the Pacific and reflects the highest credit upon Corey and the U.S. Navy Photographic Service. I watched the footage. It's bananas. He's standing on the deck of an aircraft carrier that is being strafed and kamikazes attempting to crash into it, and he does not flinch, and the shots are beautiful.
Wow.
Okay, so what a patriot, right?
I know what's coming.
Yeah. House Un-American Activities Committee pulls him up because he had at one time been a flirtatious member of the Communist Party. He refuses to name names and is blacklisted for a decade. During that time, however, he starts his own professional actors workshop, is what it ends up being called. Even though he can't appear on screen, all of the studios are sending him people to get them trained so they can be. So he's still being utilized. But some of his students, just randomly here, James Dean, Rita Moreno, Peter Fonda, Jane Fonda, Kirk Douglas, Leonard Nimoy, Jack Nicholson, Robert Towne, Robin Williams, and not a great actor, but Corey's best friend, Pat Boone, also a member, and I'm bringing him back because Pat Boone is one of the stars of this episode. It stars Pat Boone, Leif Erikson, and Larry Linville, and it concerns a father evaluating a military academy for his son's potential enrollment.
Pat Boone went to where I went to college. Pat Boone is a UNT alumni, apparently, unbeknownst to me. Also a massive, from the sound of it, not a person I would think either of us, any of us would want to spend any amount of time with, but that's fine because he plays that role in this perfectly.
Yeah, he was pretty infamous for a while of taking black people's music and then redoing it as safer white people versions of it.
Yeah, and did not know this, but evidently he was associated with milk and white shoes somehow. That was some sort of Pat Boone trademark, which is a joke in this. Like Leif Erikson offers him a glass of milk when he first comes in. Like apparently that was like a nod and a wink, I guess. All I thought when he offered him the glass of milk was, my God, you're grown men. Put that milk down.
I thought it was, you're both grown men. Split that milk together with 2 straws. It's an interesting segment only because I feel like the twist is pretty obvious from the moment you see anyone other than you don't even like some younger people, but then it's pretty apparent the moment they walk into that first room, all the people there are essentially adults. And it's like, if it's not apparent what they're telegraphing with the twist, they're going to make it even more obvious the moment they go outside.
Leif Erikson, he was the one that actually discovered America, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
This guy, the one we saw in this episode.
Yeah,
yes.
He was the son of Eric the Red, I think.
I believe that is true.
Okay, all right. The true fact, which I found odd, is that he divorced Frances Farmer the same day he married Margaret Hayes.
That is a fact.
Signed that divorce paperwork and then just turned right around and
on to the next.
Married somebody else.
He doesn't even need another pen. He's going to use the same pen.
Exactly.
Jeff Corey also is in Barney Miller, Mike, by the way.
Yeah.
Just recently. Like, literally, I think we just talked about it with is he playing a ex-con who can't hack it in the real world?
That's
I think.
right. Yeah.
Hey, and Larry Linville
Yeah.
was in The Night Stalker, and then he was in Kolchak the Night Stalker and Chopper.
That's right. Yeah. 2 roles. Yeah, he was that doctor character in one, and yeah, yep. And had police. He wasn't a captain. He was like a low-level policeman, if memory serves.
Evidently, the casting director here on Night Gallery, who cast Larry Linville, would eventually go on to cast MASH, and that's how he got that.
He was perfect in that role. He was wonderful as Frank.
Major Frank Burns. Geez, I liked Stanley Waxman most of all in this episode. He was the trigonometry professor when they walk into the trigonometry professor's room, and he goes, "This is trigonometry!" I was like, Jesus H. Christ, it sure is.
Yeah, that was a little odd. This whole segment is just like flirting with oddity, but I liked it. I really enjoyed this one. I was just like, oh, okay. Especially when Pat Boone just sells his son out. He's just not a good kid. Yep, let's put him here at the academy.
I like that the statue kind of looked like Leif Erikson. Was that on purpose? I hope so. I hope it means that he's been there forever.
Yeah, I love that whole thing where it's just, oh, shouldn't the statue be facing the other way? It's like, no, not here.
We're not sending them out.
Oh no, Rod Serling, don't you dare do anything subtle. It has to knock you over the head with a mallet. God damn, Rod Serling, we need some subtlety here, man.
Here's the subtlety. Okay, they mentioned that the Pat Boone's wife died under mysterious circumstances.
Right.
What was it, a boating accident? Now, is the implication outright is that the son was somehow involved? But did you guys detect that maybe the dad killed her and is now pawning it off on the son and is now getting rid of the son so he didn't have to deal with any of that shit anymore?
I thought that way too.
The way he acts at the end would lead me to believe so. I like how this entire premise could be completely disassembled in the matter of minutes when the only person guarding the gate is it's like a chain. It's like a chain. Like at a fucking amusement park that people just jump over. And that's what we're being led to believe has kept all of these indigents that are now perfect members of a military society. That's all that's kept them in. That and the inherent yearning for giving up their livelihood and freedom to go and live at a military academy for the rest of their lives.
No, they've been broken.
Yeah, it's like they know that they're bad people and they're just accepting this, which I found really odd. Like, is there a moment where we see somebody that's fresh off the boat coming in and just having their spirit broken and being subjected to probably torture and this stuff? No, we just see all of these very sedate men that have just been there for years and decades, and they're just, they accept their fate.
Drilling and discipline, and like now they have a purpose.
But what is their purpose?
It's worse than they're being kept there. They've now just want to be there. They just want to do this now. It's much more insidious, I think.
I agree.
Sure, it's okay.
I don't think the episode works overall, but I like what was going on behind it.
Yeah, I don't think it works either. I think the premise is interesting, but just to what end? Yeah, okay. This guy gets rid of his son, and like, all right. But I know it's a shorter segment because this entire episode has essentially been shorter segments since A Fear of Spiders, but just give us a little bit more. Marmalade Wine gave us even a interesting look. This is just very, very rote. Nothing wrong with that, but it's just rote.
Did you all admire the crew in the toll booth window in the final shot of this episode?
I don't know if I caught that or not.
Oh boy. So the limo pulls away and then we follow a group of cadets running past that toll booth in which at least 2 crew members, I don't know who they were, but they're leaning against what looks to be a VW microbus. And then the camera pans on past that and we follow the troops. And I just went, what the fuck? God damn it. You're supposed to keep me in the story.
That was part of Rod Serling's script. He had that note in there. Break the magic, please. Show the crew.
We're going to play a preview of the next episode, and we'll be right back to wrap up.
From this picture, one wouldn't necessarily conjure up the story of love, but that's precisely what it tells about. The emotion as old as man, but the object of the emotion, this is not quite as familiar. Its title, Phantom Farmhouse, offering number 1 in the Night Gallery. For our last offering in the Night Gallery, a painting that brings to life a literary classic from the pen of Conrad Aiken, fragile, lovely, haunting. Its title, Silent Snow Secret Snow.
That's right. On the next midnight viewing, we'll be taking a look at Season 2, Episode 5. That's broken into 2 segments, The Phantom Farmhouse and Silent Snow, Secret Snow. Until then, where can people find you, Chris Stashu?
WeirdingWayMedia.com. That's where this show and all the shows we work on, that's where they all are. WeirdingWayMedia.com.
How about you, Mike?
Same thing. Thanks, Chris. Thanks. You just stole my whole thunder here, Chris. Gosh.
Sorry.
All of us. All right. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, the gallery is closed or something. That's a sign off.